The contents of this podcast are solely for the purpose of sharing some interesting and unusual information and make no claims of any historical authenticity for the same. The listeners are free to make their deductions and inform us of any added information they may have regarding the story.
Explore the Unexplored. Season 1 Incredible India by Manisha Dhawan, a Prathidhwani original.
We meet yet again to tell a tale once more, which I'm sure will arouse your curiosity and make your imagination soar. So here's Manisha once more from the Prathidhwani platform, as promised, with some more of the unusual and perhaps the unknown. As is tradition, let's begin with a few tidbits from the unknown yet again. Did you know that Devrishi Narad had to once assume the form of a monkey? And to add to surprises, did you know as well that it was a boon from Lord Shiva that caused Draupadi to have 5 husbands? And to continue this journey of the unknown and unexplored, it's Manisha bringing you the next tale. So here's Manisha, ready to unfold yet another tale that's pretty much untold. As we are well aware, born as the eldest son of Kaushalya and Dashrath, the king of Ayodhya, Lord Ram is referred within Hinduism as Maryada Purushottam, literally the perfect man or Lord of self-control, or we may even say Lord of virtue. His life and journey is one of adherence to Dharma, despite all the harsh tests and obstacles and the many pains of life and time that he had to face. It is so believed that everyone born in the human form has their time and date already predestined, and the death of the human form is inevitable. But then, therein lies the difference between humans and gods. Well, gods don't die. At least that's how we've always learned it. If we were to relate back to Hindu mythology, the incarnation of Vishnu, Lord Ram, is much revered and respected. Of the trilogy of Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh, Lord Vishnu has been born multiple times for the good of the human race in various forms over the ages. As is believed, Vishnu assumed 10 different avatars, of which the 7th, as Lord Ram, is the most well known and respected. A multitude of stories have been written by Rishi Valmiki, as also by the great poet Tulsidas and many others in praise of Lord Ram. We also see temples built in his name across the length and breadth of our country. As believed, Lord Ram's rule lasted for over 10,000 years. Our last tale was one where we brought you the unusual story of Krishna's death. So, would our listeners like to know as to how Lord Rama died? Yes, indeed, the death of Lord Ram. Some people also say that death is not a term that is usually used with the avatars of Vishnu. All avatars appear to restore dharma and then they return to Vaikuntha. Thus, the disappearance, we say, of Sri Ram from earth happened when he entered the Saryu River. This divine event is described as the death of Lord Ram. Let's go right into the story and the sequence of events without any further ado. So Sri Ram ruled for 11,000 years and performed numerous yagnas for the benefit of his people. His sons and the sons of his brothers were made kings in many parts of the large empire that he ruled. During this period, Sita Devi also disappeared from earth when she was taken back by Bhudevi, Mother Earth. Love and Kush, her sons, grew to be just rulers like their father, and then came the time for Ram to leave for his heavenly abode. And why was this? What had made this the most suitable time? As the story goes, one day a sage came to Ram and asked him for a private audience. The sage insisted that no one should enter the room where they were having their conversation. So Sri Ram directed Lakshman to stand guard at the door of the room and said that if anyone entered the room during the conversation, he would be put to death. In some versions of the Ramayana, it is said that this saint was none other than Kaldev. The sage appeared to remind Ram that the objective of his appearance on earth had now been achieved and completed, and it was time for him to return to Vaikuntha, his heavenly abode. As Lakshman kept watch, the short-tempered sage Durvasa approached him and demanded an entry. He was furious when Lakshman stopped him and threatened to lay a terrible curse of destruction on Ayodhya and all its inhabitants and the entire Raghu clan. Lakshman was now in a fix. He weighed the pros and cons. He concluded that his death would indeed be a lesser calamity than the entire population of Ayodhya being destroyed. So he admitted Durvasa and stood ready to receive his punishment gladly. Lakshman's every act, as we know, was decided either as per the wish of his brother Ram or else for the general good of mankind, and Lakshman realized that this particular situation was an indicator from time, Kal, to him to disappear from earth. He agreed readily to the play of Lord Kal and walked into the Saryu river and took leave of his mortal form. Soon Sri Ram came to know of the death of Lakshman, his beloved brother, and decided it was time to end his life too. He then handed over his responsibilities to his sons and bid adieu to all. Lord Ram walked deep into the Saryu river and disappeared. Soon, in the same spot, Sri Hari Vishnu appeared, resting on Anant Shesh, and blessed his devotees. So, this not being the end of the tale, let's listen further of an incident related to the story of Lord Ram's death. One day, Ram was informed that it was time for him to die. He understood that those who take birth have to experience death. Let Yam come to me if it is time for me to return to Vaikuntha, my heavenly abode, he said. But Yam, the god of death, dared not enter Ayodhya as he was extremely afraid of Hanuman, who guarded the gates of Ram's palace. To allow Yam's entry, it was necessary to distract Hanuman. So Rama dropped his neck ring into a crack in the palace floor and requested Hanuman to fetch it. Hanuman reduced himself to the size of a beetle and entered the crack, only to discover that it was no crack but the entrance to a long tunnel that led to Naglok, the land of serpents. Hanuman met Vasuki, the king of serpents, there and informed him of his mission. Vasuki took Hanuman to the center of Naglok, where there stood a mountain of rings, and told him to hunt amongst this pile of rings. He also promised that he'd find Ram's ring there. Hanuman wondered how he would find the ring, as it was almost like finding a needle in a haystack. He started looking, and to his delight, the first ring he picked up was Ram's ring. To his astonishment, the second ring he picked up was also Ram's ring. In fact, all the rings that made up the mountain were identical. Perplexed, he wondered as to the meaning of what was happening to him. Vasuki looked at Hanuman and smiled wisely. He said, "This world we live in goes through cycles of life and death. Each life cycle of the world is called a kalp. Each kalp has 4 yugas or quarters. In the second quarter or the Treta Yuga, Ram takes birth in Ayodhya. Then, one day his ring falls into the subterranean realm of serpents through a tunnel. A monkey follows it and Ram on earth dies. So it has been for hundreds of thousands of kalps. All these rings testify to that fact." Vasuki continued, "The mountain keeps growing as more rings fall. There is enough space for the rings of future Ramas." Hanuman realized that his entry into Naglok and his encounter with the mountain of rings was no accident. It was Ram's way of telling him that he could not stop death from coming. Ram would die. The world would die. But like all things, Ram would be reborn each time the world would be reborn. So, this was the story of the death or the disappearance of Sri Ram as mentioned in many Hindu scriptures. The story of his death can also be found in the Padma Puran. It is now time to once again say goodbye. So keep yourself curious and in waiting until our next interesting and unheard of tale. And in the meanwhile, do visit Prathidhwani's podcasting website, podcast.prathidhwani.com, for more details about the story. And now, this is Manisha signing off until our next.
Explore the Unexplored. Season 1 Incredible India by Manisha Dhawan, a Prathidhwani original.